Okay, let's talk about 49ers defensive coordinator. I expect them to be looking for a new one. If that's a fact by the time you watch this video, then great, so be it. But a name that's been popular on Monday is the Bengals fired defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo, who had some very good defenses a couple of years ago, did well against Patrick Mahomes. That obviously always gets you a lot of attention. Uh, didn't do very well last year. Anytime you have an organization structured like the Bengals, where Mike Brown and family heavily involved, you should always be aware of that. Ownership heavily involved, you should always be aware of that. Did he just get scapegoated or did he need to go? When you go into Bengals media and the Bengals universe, you get varying answers. But what can't be denied is that the Bengals this year went 3-4 when they scored at least 33 points. The rest of the league went 79-7 when they scored at least 33 points. Would Lou be a good option for Kyle Shanahan? Yes, but he's not the best option. The best option is the most obvious option. And Robert Saleh should not only want the 49ers defensive coordinator job, but if he wants to be a head coach again in the league, he should be begging Kyle Shanahan to come back and be the new defensive coordinator. I think Kyle Shanahan should want it. A little familiarity would go a long way. The experience of Saleh, I don't think he can go back to the first-time defensive coordinator this time. I do think Nick Sorensen should be back as keep him on the staff. Coaching staffs who make changes like this and then just fire the guy because they feel like they have to and don't reassign him, that's usually a sign of external pressure or ownership pressure or front office pressure. If you believe in the guy, there's no reason you can't keep him around, demote him, and give him an opportunity to work his way back. But the 49ers next year, as you know, have the fourth place schedule in the NFC West. What that equates to is the easiest schedule in the NFL. A 415 winning percentage, 32nd based on this year's wins and losses. 415 winning percentage. That's next year's opponents. If you're a defensive coordinator, this is the place to go. Kyle Shanahan doesn't want to mess with you on defense. Yeah, you need to get a few better players, but where don't you need to get a few better players? Or maybe Vance Joseph leaves in Denver, or maybe Aaron Glenn leaves in Detroit. If they leave to become head coaches, fine. But even then, you want to be Sean Payton's DC? I think this is the best job there is. I mean, the quarterbacks you'll play next year, it'll be CJ Stroud and Baker Mayfield and Anthony Richardson, maybe Shedeur Sanders and the Giants, Michael Penix and Bryce Young and Trevor Lawrence and the Titans. So this is the place to be if you're a defensive coordinator. By the way, before I go on and talk about Robert Saleh's likelihood, let's also talk about Prize Picks. Code GUY, a $5 lineup. Get you $50. Boom, a bonus immediately into your account. I've got multiple lineups right now going for the playoffs coming up, the college and pro. Do I have to say pro playoffs, NFL playoffs? Here's a lineup I've got for college. Will Howard, less than 247.5 passing yards. I need a field goal from the Texas kicker. I got Riley Leonard under 47.5 rushing yards. How about this one, people? Bryce Lance. I got Trey Lance's brother scoring a touchdown. I need him to score a touchdown. That, as I'm recording this, that game's 30 minutes away in the playoffs, the D2 FCS playoffs, North Dakota State, Montana State. So I need a touchdown there. I got CJ Stroud, more than 231.5 passing yards, and Bo Nix on the road in Buffalo, less than 222.5. So anyway, code GUY, make a $5 lineup, immediately get $50 into your account. The only reason to me, if you're Robert Saleh, to not take the job is you want a year off. You don't want to be with Kyle again. You became a head coach, and then you got the freedom of being a head coach, and so you don't want to be under the. No, you know exactly how to run this operation. You know exactly who the leaders in your locker room are. You're going to walk back in, and there's Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, and you got some young players you can work with. I think if you're the Niners and Lou Anarumo, let's say, is an interesting candidate to you. I think the kind of the history was that it was sometimes feast or famine, but not very consistent. It could be a little inconsistent in Cincinnati. If you're the Niners, you're looking at this upcoming schedule that you play, and you got Geno twice, you got Arizona twice. You obviously get the Rams, so there's some familiarity that helps. But You need consistency. You need high floor out of your defensive coordinator next year. Your offense, McCaffrey said on Monday he could have come back and played in the playoffs had the 49ers made the playoffs. So I think you're going to get this Brock Purdy contract. It's not going to drag out. You get Ayuk back healthy. You find a way to bring Kittle back. I think you find a way to bring Kyle Juszczyk back and work that money. You don't want to pay him $7 million, but you work that money. You can't he's playing at a high level. I saw he said no regression. I agree with him. I said that on Sunday. And if you're listening to the podcast earlier, I agree with Kyle Juszczyk, no regression. And who you replace? You have no replacements for a very important position on you. You clearly value the position that Kyle Juszczyk plays, and there are no replacements. You have none in mind. So what you need against this schedule is a defense that will be predictably solid every week. I know this. You are not going to have against that quarterback schedule next year. The Niners just finished the season without a pick in 7 weeks. You are not, guarantee you this right now, you are not going 7 games without an interception against these quarterbacks that you're playing next year. Deshaun, whoever the Saints quarterback is, I said Shador, Giants, maybe not. They played their way out of it potentially. So I love this schedule for a defensive coordinator. And any defensive coordinator with any aspirations of not failing should take the 49ers defensive coordinator job. There's not a better job on the market to be the defensive coordinator. You don't want to, I don't know, as I'm doing this, I don't know, Mike McCarthy's back and Mike Zimmer. You don't want that job, defensive coordinator for the Cowboys. This is the job. This is the job. And a lot of guys should take it. By the way, I was looking at some of the Bengals numbers. MVP caliber performance from Burrow. Trey Hendrickson led the league in sacks. Jamar Chase led the NFL in receiving yards. He had almost 200 more receiving yards than Justin Jefferson. He led the league in catches. He had 12 more catches than Amon-Ra St. Brown. He led the league in touchdown receptions, 17. That's 4 more than Terry McLaurin. And you don't make the playoffs? They spent a lot of effort on defensive line. I'm bringing up the Bengals because I just know there's sort of this understandable. Lou Anarumo, as one assistant coach, texted me. He had one down year and he was the scapegoat. So people think highly of him. Even it's not like they lost respect there. Who knows exactly what happened? But it doesn't feel like they're up in arms either that he's gone. And the Mahomes stuff is attractive. So anyway, that's why I'm spending time on them. But they spent a lot of effort on defense. Defensive personnel, defensive line, the first round pick from 2 years ago on the defensive line. I don't think he had a sack this year, Murphy. So Ejiro Evero's not a candidate. He's going to be back in Carolina. He's their defensive coordinator. So anyway, I mean, this is, if you're trying to convince a guy, if the Niners want Saleh and have to convince him, like Robert's thinking, maybe I'll take a year. Robert should be begging for this job. And this should be, as the Niners go out and look for a defensive coordinator, this should be at the top of their pitch. Hey, man, Kyle wants to leave you alone. Now, Kyle also wants to leave special teams alone. I would say Kyle Shanahan's one of his big offseason, and we'll see when he and John Lynch talk this week, but he's got to care about special teams in a way that they as an organization have to care about special teams in a way that makes them spend money on a special teams coach. There's fewer and fewer of these guys. A lot of college programs don't have a special teams coach anymore. They just split it up between a few different teams. So a few different coaches split up the responsibilities. I mentioned on the earlier stuff this week about being excited that the Niners got the 11th pick in the draft, and I got a comment here on YouTube from B, who says 70% of the 49ers drafts have been in the first round, so they could trade down and get more picks. So the question is that accurate? Have 70% of the Niners' first-round picks been draft busts? And the answer is, I think no, but close. But it also depends how you define the draft bust. When you look over the last, when you look over Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch drafts, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Well, they didn't have a first round pick in 22 and 23. 24, Ricky Pearsall, TBD. I know he finished strong. We'll see. But Trey Lance, bust. Javon Kinlaw, bust. Solomon Thomas, 2017, bust. Reuben Foster, bust. So there's 4 busts. Now, not all busts are created equal. Mike McGlinchey, I think this comment would put McGlinchey in the bust category, which I understand, but he was a 5-year starter. He's not a bust. He's not a hit. He's not a franchise tackle, but he's in a weird middle ground. So if you say it's 5 out of 7, if you include McGlinchey as a bust, Ayuk, Bosa being the hits, then you're at 70%. So I would understand that definition. I put it at 4.5 busts, which is 64%, not far off. Not far off. But I think the answer to that is not to stop swinging at first rounders. There is real logic to this, even whether we nitpick, whether it's 64% or 70%, there's real logic here when you're a team that lacks the depth that the Niners have. And that's part of what I said was so important about getting the best possible pick. You get the best possible pick, you can move back and still get good players. You can go from 11 to 14 instead of 14 to 17. Or you're at 14 and nobody wants to move to 14. You're at 11, maybe somebody wants to move to 11. You're at 15, nobody wants to move to 15. Some of these drafts, we'll see how this one turns out. Some of these drafts have, like last year's, basically, I think give or take, depending on who you believed, 15, 16, 17 players were the first round grade. First round picks are not first round grades. Just somebody has to get drafted. So I am open to them trading back for sure. Yep. I think there's a lot of logic to that point, but you got to see who's there. Maybe there's 5 guys worth, maybe there's 3 guys, maybe there's 1 guy, maybe there's 1 first round graded player left and he's an offensive lineman. And so you take him. So we'll see. But the key is just you give yourselves the best chance at making something happen. All right. Time is ticking as we do this on Monday. They've not yet announced when John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan will have their year-end press conference. I think the later, the longer we go without knowing, the more likely it is that we see some sort of organizational change, a different defensive coordinator. Nick Sorensen getting fired. And like I said, I just want to make sure I made the point clear. Like, if you still believe in the guy as a coach, if you still think he's a good coach, but not a good defensive coordinator, to me, there's no shame in going, all right, he's going back to a position coach. If he wants to, right? I think you see that happen in places where like the coach is really well, the head coach has a lot of equity. And you know what? This didn't work. It doesn't mean he's a total zero and we got to get him out of the building just because he wasn't a successful defensive coordinator, especially as a young guy. So, we do it with players all the time. You get benched, you come back. You get benched, you play a new role. You go from being a starter to a reserve. He was good enough to be a positional coach in 2023. He's good enough to be one in 2025 if he wants to be. So if that's the way they go, I would be at least impressed by that sort of conviction. All right. That sort of conviction. But you're going to see a lot of Lou Anarumo. It's a tough year he's coming off of. You could call him a scapegoat, and I think there's probably some truth to it. But it was really 2 not good years for the Bengals defense. So I just keep that in mind. Also keep in mind you go to heyguy.co and buy hats. Get your 262 hat. Get your Hey Guy hat. These would be good on the golf course, I'll tell you that. heyguy.co. All right, y'all. Appreciate you. Talk to you soon. Later.